Gen Z is shaking up the way we all consume entertainment, news, products, and there is no ignoring the role social media has been playing in that revolution, and definitely no rolling it back. I'm Annalise Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we're looking to how young people are drawing the marketing lines and forcing companies to follow, and how brands have to find a message beyond the hard sell if they want to stay relevant.
My favorite thing on the internet right now is these huge companies that have been around for so many years hiring these like 23-year-old Gen Zs to run their social media. Like, I swear I'll just like post a random video and then I'll get a comment. It's like, no, because why is this literally me? And I go and click on it and it's like nationwide insurance.
Brat summer is over, bestie. It's time to enter your historical era.
Northumberland Zoo hits different.
These wooden shutters are giving me life.
See how people take phone calls in our phone booth? Very considerate, very mindful, very demure.
Pay up or shut up.
Gen Z has a different way of looking at the world, and if corporations want to capture the attention of those under the age of 27, they have to be mindful of their rapidly changing habits. So many businesses are now putting young people in the driver's seat to help them navigate the digital marketing landscape while building community and brand loyalty online. Joining us today to give us insight into that are Ashwin Krishnaswamy, a content creator and branding and marketing consultant, Erifili Gunari, founder and CEO of the Z-Link, a global social media agency, and Ben Harms, Chief Growth Officer at Arch Rival, a youth culture agency. Thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you for being part of the stream. Ben, let me start with you. What is a youth culture agency? What are you guys doing up there?
Yeah, that's a great question. At the end of the day, we're a creative and a marketing agency, but our goal is to help any number of global brands, from an Adidas to Spotify or Red Bull, really help figure out, how do we win with youth culture today? How do we stay ahead of where culture is going? So we really just help a lot of global brands connect into culture in far more authentic and relevant ways today that really win the hearts and minds of youth culture.
And there's definitely been a huge shift in culture. I mean, it's difficult to even start a conversation about culture if you're not online. Erifili, your company has been doing a similar work in the sense that you're connecting big brands with younger consumers, especially on when it comes to their strategy online. Can you tell us, what would you say have been the biggest, most significant changes among consumers within the Gen Z generation when you compare to previous generations?
I'd say it all stems from the fact that Gen Z is, of course, the first generation of digital natives, and that impacts a lot of our behaviors and the ways we interact with digital channels and brands and everything like that. So from our side, we help brands that want to market to Gen Z, but also brands that want to reach Gen Z as employers. And the things that come up again and again that matter most are, first of all, the fact that Gen Z engages a lot better with real people behind brands rather than faceless brands themselves. So whenever we can show the humanity behind a brand, that's very, very impactful. And then the second part is that Gen Z really values community and brands that can create spaces for connection and foster genuine communities and interaction around shared interests, for example.
Ashwin, your take here. Do you agree that Gen Z are much more interested in people and authentic connections, even though they're doing all this online?
Yeah, I think, people as faces of the brands is a really important component of this. But I also think that there is this element or shift where companies have to realize, hey, in every piece of content that we put out there or in our content strategy, we can't just be focused on selling our product or selling our brand every single time. We need to think about content that is either educational or entertaining or providing some value to people outside of, hey, here's our product, look at it and buy it. And this is still a very hard lesson for marketers and kind of established brands to learn.
That's a very interesting point. In terms of just how much the habits of young people have changed. Here's one clip that we found on social media. Take a look.
There's a stat that 60% of Gen Zs use TikTok as a search engine more than Google.
I'm not surprised by that stat. When I started looking at just random things, I recognized that I was starting to do that. For example, if I want to go to Cancun, I type in TikTok, best food in Cancun, best resorts in Cancun. I'm not going to Google to do that. And I'm going to TikTok to see reviews, to see people's experience, to see the live footage. Like, hey, look, I'm at this pool. This pool sucks. Don't come here. Or, hey, this place is amazing. You should. It gives me, not that it's going to make my decision. It's going to help influence my decision.
Ben, I'm still Googling stuff. I guess that speaks volumes about my age. But I mean, Gen Z is a generation, as Arifili was saying, is this digital native generation. And they're definitely navigating this world as if it's second nature. How important would you say it is for companies to then bring them in and invite them to help with the communication, with the conveying of messages that these companies are trying to get across?
I mean, I think it's incredibly important. At the end of the day, trust has changed so much in culture. And for so many generations before, everything was sort of top down, whether that was marketing and brands, CEOs, politicians. But we've seen this huge shift in trust where people today, they trust people like themselves. They trust other experts online. I love the comments that both of my colleagues here have mentioned because there is such a dynamic shift when it comes to what content young people are looking for, how they're wanting to interact with brands. And yes, they are searching completely differently. I mean, we see such a significant drop in traditional search, but we see social becoming this engine for finding content. In fact, in a recent study that we did in partnership with Vogue Business, where we were just looking at those habits of how Gen Z navigate the world and connect with brands, we saw this huge shift. Like, I'm an older millennial, right? 40% of millennials believe that shifts in culture and trends are still created by brands. But only 15% of Gen Z agree with that, right? Like, they see the shifts and the trends happening in culture coming from people like themselves, right? So there's just such a massive shift in sort of where power in culture is really coming from, and it's coming from everyday people.
Arifili, do you agree? And would you say that brands are aware and easily convinced that they actually need younger people as part of their teams when creating content to attract young people?
I think they're starting to be more aware now. I definitely agree with what Ben said, that that's all very true from our research and experience as well. And I think brands are just now realizing that it seems quite intuitive that if you want to reach Gen Z, you should be actually speaking with Gen Z rather than only having them externally and doing external research. It helps so much to bring young people in your team as content creators, as marketers, hear their perspectives and give them a platform to share their voice. Because that also shows that you're not just trying to market to Gen Z to sell to them, but you actually care to give them the chance to share their own perspective openly.
And Ashwin, for a while now, we've been talking about the role of influencers, right? These individuals with huge following online, able to produce very crafted content, and how brands have been utilizing that. But apparently, you don't have to have a large following to be an asset to companies anymore, nor do you have to invest in producing complicated material. Take a look.
After a long day, I love to unwind with a hot cup of tea. Not junk food, not a glass of wine, a hot cup of tea, which relaxes me and makes me feel better before I go to bed. Now, let's see what's going on in the world today.
Nearly 70% of Gen Z and millennials report feeling lonely. I wonder if that gave you watching any ideas, for example, to watch us here on the stream. Jojo Anya is a user-generated content creator who made that video for us. And here's what she sees in this new method of marketing. Take a look.
You're kind of humanizing these companies. Like, yes, they're these huge corporations, but when you see someone who maybe looks like you or maybe lives a realistic life that compares to yours, you're therefore more able to like relate to the product and or relate to the person, and then also the product is more appealing to you because you're like, okay, I'm seeing this person, they're regular like me, and it's not just this huge corporation throwing stuff in my face. It's not saying explicitly, oh, commercial break or anything like that. Like it's just a person talking to me or doing things within their day using this product. Another important point with UGC is there's a lot of inclusion there. Like companies are realizing that they are not appealing to the greater population because maybe there's so many faces that don't look like the greater population. And they're also noticing that a lot of people are feeling left out. And if they're feeling left out when they're watching the commercials, of course they're going to tune out. Of course they're going to be like, I don't really care about this. Like it's the same thing over and over, just another commercial. So, yeah.
Ashwin, you were nodding your head while Jojo was speaking there. Can I get you to comment on this new trend of UGC, user-generated content, being used as a marketing tool? But also, how much does this speak of this other trend, the so-called de-influencing? People seem to be a bit tired of these perfect influencers. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening. There's few things kind of happening right now. One is these algorithms have changed both on TikTok as well as Instagram and basically short form video, where you don't need to have a large following in order for your video to go viral or get a lot of reach. So you have creators who have, 1,000 followers, 2,000 followers, who can just as easily put out a piece of content that gets millions of views. And that's happening kind of time and time again. There's so many case studies of that. Second, you've had this period over the past 10 years where brands have been so focused on gifting product to influencers that people have become tired and saturated of seeing them. Hey, I'm, Kourtney Kardashian. I just got a box of product and let me open them and let me show you what I got. People are kind of fatigued of that. They say, hey, I have no resonance with that person. They live such a different life than me, and they're constantly getting free product, and it seems like they're always trying to sell me something. Whereas that creator with 2,000 followers who maybe gets a product for the first time gives a very honest and earnest review as though you are a friend talking to them on FaceTime is far more relatable. It is more persuasive. It is more engaging to watch. So we've seen this rise of UGC with these small kinds of micro creators. And that is really kind of driving pretty outsized business results for brands, both large and small.
And it's what you were talking about, right, Ben? When it comes to trust has really changed in this culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would agree with everything that Ashwin just said. Like, we've seen that brands be really successful on social are building a deeper sense of community through their current customers. And it's not about the major celebrity. It's about actually building a real connection with people and with culture. Part of that's actually even passing the mic to your own employees, your own associates, maybe those people working in retail who can actually talk about your product because they know it really passionately, but they're everyday people, right? And I think that's the huge shift that we're seeing. Brands that can really build an intentional strategy when it comes to like getting the right authentic voices to the table, they're the ones that are winning today. I totally agree.
Some of the strategies are relatively easy to see. And then there is the case of a cookie company that's gained a lot of popularity recently for their social media activity. I mean, millions of views on each video. Let's take a look.
Yes.
I mean, Arifili, can you help us understand what is going on there? I mean, is there a strategy behind this method, or is it a matter of just seeing what sticks?
Funnily enough, we just made a TikTok about this on our agency TikTok, talking about Nutter Butter's TikTok specifically. I'd say rather than thinking of like what the strategy is, what they're doing is trying to tap into two things. One is they're tapping into the very niche Gen Z culture on TikTok, where there's a huge part of content, also on Instagram Reels, that simply just makes no sense. And it's pretty much the side of TikTok that's called brain rot. And so they're tapping into brain rot and trying to show Gen Z that they have trend awareness, they have cultural awareness. And also the second side that's quite important is that it's Kawaii, it's like quite a good shock factor for Gen Z viewers to see brands that they would expect to be very serious and reserved, taking themselves very lightly and not too seriously, and experimenting with content like that, that normally would have to go through like a 5-step approvals processes from a corporate team, and you'd normally have legal departments being like, no, maybe let's not post that. But showing Gen Zers that their team is open to posting stuff like that kind of makes Gen Z viewers be like, okay, maybe this brand is kind of cool. Maybe they have people in their team that are willing to play around and have fun. And it just changes their whole perception of the brand. It doesn't feel like marketing. It feels just like, they're having fun.
And taking some risks as well. Ashwin, would you say that that is working for them? And what are some of the other strategies and avenues that you see companies taking online that are actually successful?
So what I think is really important is that I made a TikTok about Nutter Butter's TikTok strategy too, because I know that when a strategy starts to work and get some traction, or an account gets some traction, brands will pile on and say, hey, we need to go viral like Nutter Butter. So it seems like we could just make content that is unhinged and replicates the same thing. And 95% of the time, they're not going to find success doing that. And I think what is so important is taking it a step further and understanding, hey, why was that working for Nutter Butter? So in Nutter Butter's case, they've had a legacy brand that has been around for over 50 years. They have widespread distribution. People are familiar with the name. They just haven't really thought about Nutter Butter since maybe they were a kid, or really just ever thought about it. And so when you see this corporate account that you've kind of seen everywhere, and that juxtaposed with how bizarre the content is, that juxtaposition is kind of part of what's interesting. It stands out because it interrupts this pattern of what you would expect from a brand like that. So if every brand then just starts doing that and thinking that's the trend, we've kind of distanced ourselves from the logic of why it works in and of itself. So it's not that every brand can just bandwagon on and start doing this. And so for every Nutter Butter kind of unhinged brain rot strategy that seems to be working, there are strategies that are, thoughtful talking heads of, a brand owner or CEO, instructing you on product. There are older people behind the scenes showing how a product is manufactured. I mean, there's so many different things that work for a brand that it truly needs to be understood as hey, how are we kind of connecting with our audience, and how are we doing that in a kind of thoughtful way here?
Sure, obviously you need to be thinking about who you're talking to and what message you're trying to convey, etc. But I also want to bring to your attention, because Arifili mentioned this, your agency connects also companies that are looking for young people to hire. It only makes sense that young people use social media to also look for jobs and advertise themselves. Take a look at this TikToker's post about being open to work.
I lost my job, so here's my Hire Me campaign.
I was petrified, been made redundant twice this year, my spirit could have died. But that's the times we're living in, and hey, I did choose marketing, so I stand strong as I look for another job. And so I'm back to LinkedIn to tell you I'm open for work. My inbox, please come and jump in. I've got a fire for marketing, and I'd love to keep that going strong. So if you think for just 1 second you would like to take me on, come on now, go. Drop me a call. Let's turn this around. Invite me to your Christmas ball. I know my luck, it's not been great, I cannot lie, but you think I'd crumble. You think I lay down and die? Oh, now I will survive.
One of the most interesting aspects of that particular post is that a bunch of people actually offered him jobs in the comments. There was even a comment by LinkedIn and stuff, so it was quite successful. I want to talk about the future now and where you guys think marketing will go, because we're also talking about a generation that's been online so much that seems a bit tired of it, seems a bit tired of being pushed products all the time and perfect content, etc. Ben, what is your take in where do you think marketing will actually go in the next decade?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, it has to come back to adding value to people's lives. And I think that can take a lot of different forms. And even though we were just talking about how content can be wildly entertaining and kind of insane and crazy, and is a way to like sort of stop you in your tracks, there is this sense that at its core, it's always got to add value into people's lives, right? And you just made the comment about how it's evolving really quickly. In fact, we just had a recent stat where 62% of Gen Z feel like they're just overwhelmed and it's all media and it's no longer social. Like it's lost the plot of why social media was born in the first place, to really connect us and add value to our lives. So I think you see a lot of young people wanting to find what matters in all of it at the end of the day. And whether that's an authentic connection with friends and family, or products that I'm looking for, brands that are inspiring, or my favorite sports team or community that I'm a part of, I think it's going to push back more and more to that core where it's got to add value to people's lives. And so, yes, we're still going to have a lot of wildly engaging and interesting and dynamic content out there. But if it's not truly creating some sense of purpose and connection in people's lives, I think we'll see more and more people look for other spaces that are less mass media and have far more authentic connections with real people and real ideas that they want to connect with.
Arifili, do you agree that the future has to be authentic? What do you think marketing will look like in 10 years?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think it's very interesting what Ben said, because we're seeing the rise of platforms now like Substack that are more niche social media platforms aiming to connect creators over shared interests, and they have a much more real community feel. So that's why we're seeing all the time, for example, on Substack, Gen Zers posting like, I haven't been on Instagram in 2 weeks and I'm just scrolling Substack, because everyone feels like a real person and the content is so good and there's so much thought behind it. So examples like that, I think we're going to see more platforms rising along those lines to offer spaces where Gen Z feels like there's no ads, they're not being bombarded by information and anxiety-inducing content all the time, but rather they can just go and look at media that they enjoy and connect with real people in a very immediate way.
But that is until a company discovers that space and then goes there and does some marketing in that space, no?
Yeah, probably. But I think you're seeing already those initial users being very opposed to that idea and being like, I hope brands don't come to this platform. And I think as these tend to be startup teams that are very user conscious, I would like to believe that they're sort of creating these platforms very mindfully when it comes to how brands can come in into that space, because they know that users wouldn't react well. And, you know, after a point, you just have to believe that there's people wanting to genuinely build some apps and spaces online that will remain good and meaningful and allow you to use social media more mindfully as Gen Z.
Ashwin, your take here. Do you think that there will be spaces free of marketing, or where will marketing go? What kind of marketing will we see in the future that is authentic enough to be incorporated in these spaces?
Yeah, I think on a long enough time horizon, for better or for worse, marketing and brand kind of infiltrates all of these spaces. I think, you know, something that has been interesting to see, at least over the past, I would say 18 months or so, is you know, there's this conversation of kind of decline of the third spaces, which has been, you know, going on for some time now. But we've also seen kind of like post-COVID, post-college exits for Gen Z, a rise in communities like run clubs and just these spaces that are happening in real life where people are getting together. And the way that kind of brands or kind of marketers are getting into these spaces is you see running brands starting their own run clubs, just seeing the rise in these communities and saying, hey, well, we support running and we support runners and we have some infrastructure to pull these people together. We're not going to sell them our product. We're simply just going to provide the value of the meeting spot. And if they so happen to build an affinity with our brand and then over the long term become a customer, then great. And I think that is a much more natural middle ground where people are saying, hey, I go to the Nike Run Club and I've met great friends there and had great experiences, but I've never felt like I've needed to buy a product. And so I think more of these IRL kind of communities and experiences and opportunities is maybe kind of wishful thinking, but I'm optimistic in terms of that's what we're going to see more of, and less of a conversation of, hey, how do we just reach people online?
That's That's a beautiful future there that you describe. Ashwin, Erifili, and Ben, thank you all so much for being part of the stream today. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for tuning in. Stay in touch with us on social media. If you have a conversation or a topic that you'd like to flag for us, use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we'll look into your ideas. Take care, and I'll see you soon.